They bought him for the price of a horse. They whipped him in the fields. They told him he was nothing. But 20 years later, this same man would command armies, outsmart generals, and change the fate of nations. This is the story of a slave who became a legend. Before we begin this incredible journey, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't believe where this story goes. And if you make it to the end, drop a comment telling me which part shocked you the most. Now, let's dive in. The year was 1783. The place, a bustling port marketplace in the Caribbean, where human beings were sold like cattle. The air was thick with salt, sweat, and despair. Among the dozens of souls standing on the auction block that day was a young man, barely 18 years old. His name was Gabriel, though that name would mean nothing to the men bidding on him. To them, he was just another pair of hands, another body to work their sugar plantations until it broke. The auctioneer's voice rang out across the crowd. Strong back, good teeth, no visible scars. The bidding started low. Gabriel stood there, chains cutting into his wrists, and did something that would define the rest of his life. He looked up. While every other person on that platform kept their eyes down, accepting their fate, Gabriel looked directly at the men who were buying him. He studied their faces, their gestures, the way they talked and moved. Even in chains, his mind was free, and it was working. A plantation owner named Whitmore bought him for 60 pounds sterling, the same price as a decent horse. Gabriel was loaded onto a cart with 5 others and taken to a sprawling sugar estate that stretched as far as the eye could see. This place would be his prison, his hell, and, unknowingly, his school. Life on the plantation was exactly what you'd imagine, and somehow worse. The days started before sunrise and ended long after sunset. The work was backbreaking, the conditions inhumane, and the punishments for even the smallest infractions were brutal. Gabriel saw things in those first months that would haunt him forever. He saw the strongest men broken, the proudest spirits crushed, and hope dying in people's eyes day by day. But Gabriel was different. While his body worked the fields, his mind refused to be enslaved. He watched everything. He noticed how the overseers organized their patrols, where the weaknesses in the plantation's defenses were, how the masters communicated with each other. He memorized schedules, routines, patterns, and at night, while others collapsed into exhausted sleep, Gabriel taught himself to read. He'd steal glimpses of newspapers left behind by the masters. He'd study the letters on supply crates. Slowly, painfully, word by word, he unlocked the written language. Knowledge became his rebellion, education his weapon. There was an old man on the plantation, a man named Benjamin, who had been a warrior in West Africa before being captured and sold. Benjamin recognized something in Gabriel that others missed. He saw a strategic mind, a natural leader, someone who didn't just react to the world, but analyzed it. Benjamin became Gabriel's teacher. In whispered conversations during rare moments of rest, he shared stories of warfare from his homeland, of tactics and strategies, of how smaller forces could defeat larger ones through intelligence and planning. He told Gabriel something that would echo through the rest of his life. Chains on your body, not your mind. Remember that, boy. They can own your time, but they can't own your thoughts. Your mind is your territory, and in there, you're already free. 3 years passed, 3 years of suffering, learning, and planning. Then came the whispers, revolution. The word spread through the plantations like wildfire. Across the island, enslaved people were rising up. They were fighting back. They were winning. The whispers became louder, more urgent. Join us. Fight. Be free. Gabriel made his decision during a violent storm. The rain fell in sheets, thunder rolled across the sky, and in the chaos of that night, he ran. He wasn't the only one. 12 others fled with him, disappearing into the darkness, into the mountains, into the unknown. As Gabriel ran through the mud and rain, he looked back one last time at the plantation. The place that had tried to break him had instead forged him. He made himself a promise that night. He would return to this place, but not as a slave, as a liberator. The rebel camp was hidden deep in the mountain forests, a sprawling collection of makeshift shelters housing hundreds of escaped slaves. When Gabriel arrived, exhausted and hungry, he was met with suspicion. Everyone who came to the camp had to prove themselves. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. Gabriel didn't try to impress them with strength or bravado. Instead, he watched and listened. The rebels were brave, passionate, and determined. But they lacked organization. They had courage, but no strategy. They fought like individuals, not like an army. Gabriel saw it all within his first week. When the rebel leaders were planning their next raid on a supply convoy, Gabriel spoke up for the first time. He suggested a different approach. Instead of a direct attack, he proposed an ambush using the terrain to their advantage. He explained how they could cut off escape routes, how they could force the enemy into a kill zone, how they could maximize their impact while minimizing their risk. The leaders were skeptical. Who was this newcomer telling them how to fight? But something about Gabriel's calm confidence made them listen. They tried his plan. It worked perfectly. The raid was their most successful yet, with no casualties on their side and significant supplies captured. People started paying attention to the young man with the strategic mind. Gabriel became obsessed with learning everything he could about warfare. He found books in the supplies they captured, military manuals, histories of great battles, treatises on strategy. He studied Napoleon's campaigns, Caesar's conquests, the guerrilla tactics of mountain fighters from across the world. But he didn't just copy what he read. He adapted it, mixed it with what Benjamin had taught him about African warfare, and added his own innovations based on their unique situation. His approach was different from anyone else's. While other commanders thought in terms of individual battles, Gabriel thought in terms of campaigns. While others focused on killing the enemy, Gabriel focused on breaking their will to fight. He understood something crucial. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had advantages too. They knew the terrain. They had nothing to lose, and they were fighting for something the enemy could never understand: freedom. Over the next 2 years, Gabriel rose through the ranks. He was given command of a small unit, then a larger one, then an entire division. He won battle after battle, not through superior force, but through superior thinking. He would attack where the enemy was weakest, retreat when they expected him to stand and fight, and strike when they thought they were safe. He was unpredictable, methodical, and devastatingly effective. There was one battle that cemented his reputation. The colonial forces had set a trap for the rebels, a carefully planned ambush that should have destroyed their main force. But Gabriel saw it coming. He read the enemy's movements like a book, recognized the pattern, and understood the trap before they sprung it. Not only did he avoid the ambush, but he turned it around on them. The hunters became the hunted. It was a masterpiece of tactical thinking. And after that day, Gabriel wasn't just respected. He was feared by his enemies and revered by his allies. The rebellion's council of leaders appointed him as their chief strategist. It was an unprecedented position for someone so young, and it came at a critical time. The rebellion was at a crossroads. They'd won many small victories, but the colonial forces were bringing in reinforcements. The tide was turning against them, food was running low, ammunition was scarce, and morale was dropping. Some leaders were talking about negotiating a surrender, accepting minor concessions, and ending the fight. Gabriel stood before the council and proposed something that made everyone think he'd lost his mind. He wanted to attack the capital. Not raid it, not harass it, but take it. The colonial stronghold, defended by hundreds of trained soldiers, protected by stone walls and cannons. It seemed like suicide. But Gabriel laid out his plan with such clarity, such detail, such confidence, that even the doubters started to believe he didn't propose a direct assault. That would be suicide. Instead, he designed something far more sophisticated. A multi-stage operation that would use deception, psychology, timing, and the enemy's own assumptions against them. He would make them think the rebels were doing one thing while actually doing another. He would turn their strengths into weaknesses and their confidence into vulnerability. The plan had 3 phases. First, create chaos. Launch small attacks across the island, making the colonial forces spread thin, trying to respond to threats everywhere. Second, the feint. Make a visible, noisy move toward the eastern side of the capital, drawing troops away from the real target. Third, the real strike. A night assault through terrain the enemy considered impassable, hitting them where they least expected it, from an angle they weren't defending. It was audacious. It was risky. It required perfect timing and coordination, but Gabriel had already proven himself. The council voted, and the decision was made. They would bet everything on this one throw of the dice. The operation began 3 weeks later. Gabriel orchestrated it like a symphony conductor. Every element timed to perfection. The diversionary raids went out first, creating panic and confusion. Colonial forces rushed to respond, spreading themselves thin just as Gabriel predicted. Then came the feint, a large force making a very visible, very loud approach to the eastern walls. Drums, torches, shouting, everything designed to draw attention and reinforcements to that side of the city. Meanwhile, Gabriel led the real assault force through a mountain pass that the colonial forces had dismissed as too difficult for an army to navigate. They moved at night, in silence, through treacherous terrain. It took 12 hours of hard climbing, but they reached their destination. The western walls, lightly defended because everyone was watching the east, the attack came at dawn. By the time the colonial forces realized what was happening, Gabriel's fighters were already inside the walls. The battle was intense, but brief. The enemy was caught off balance, disoriented, and demoralized. They'd been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outfought. By noon, the capital was in rebel hands. The governor himself, the man who'd sent thousands to their deaths to protect slavery, surrendered his sword to Gabriel. A former slave. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The men who would have bought and sold Gabriel without a second thought now stood before him, defeated. The system that had declared him property had been overthrown by his genius. But Gabriel's story doesn't end with that victory. In many ways, it was just beginning. After the war, as the new government formed, Gabriel became one of its key leaders. But his real passion was military education. He established a military academy where he trained the next generation of officers. He wrote extensively about strategy and tactics, and his writings were studied not just in his homeland, but across the world. Military historians would later analyze Gabriel's campaigns and find techniques that predated modern warfare concepts by decades. His use of psychological warfare, his understanding of logistics, his ability to read and predict enemy movements, All of it was far ahead of his time. Generals from future wars would study his battles and learn from them. But what truly set Gabriel apart wasn't just his tactical brilliance, it was his humanity. Unlike many military leaders who saw soldiers as expendable resources, Gabriel valued every life. His strategies were designed to minimize casualties, even among his enemies when possible. He understood that victory won through massacre was hollow, that the goal wasn't just to win battles, but to build a better society afterward. As Gabriel grew older, he spent less time on battlefields and more time teaching. He would sit with young officers and tell them that strategy wasn't about memorizing tactics from books. It was about understanding people, understanding psychology, understanding that war is ultimately about human decisions and human behavior. He taught them to think 3 steps ahead, to see the whole board, to understand that winning a single battle means nothing if you lose the campaign. His philosophy was simple but profound. Know yourself and your enemy. Turn weakness into strength. Win the war, not just the battles. These principles, born from his experience as a slave, as someone who had to overcome impossible odds with nothing but his mind, became the foundation of modern strategic thinking in his nation. People often asked him how he did it. How did a man with no formal military training, who spent his teenage years in bondage, become one of history's greatest military minds? Gabriel's answer was always the same. Slavery tried to take everything from him, but it couldn't take his ability to think, to learn, to adapt. In trying to make him less than human, his oppressors had inadvertently created someone who understood oppression so deeply that he knew exactly how to defeat it. There's something else the history books often leave out. Gabriel's impact went far beyond military victories. He fundamentally changed how people thought about warfare and freedom. He proved that brilliance wasn't determined by birth or status, that genius could emerge from the most unlikely places, that the system that claimed some people were naturally inferior was built on lies. His greatest victory wasn't taking the capital. It was proving, beyond any doubt, that he was never really a slave at all. His body had been in chains, but his mind, his spirit, the essence of who he was, that had always been free. They could buy his labor, but they could never buy his thoughts. They could control his movements, but they could never control his dreams. Gabriel lived to be 73 years old. In his final years, surrounded by former soldiers who had become lifelong friends, he would reflect on his journey from an auction block to a command post, from property to legend, from slave to master strategist. When asked if he had any regrets, he said no. Every hardship had taught him something. Every injustice had sharpened his resolve. Every moment of suffering had prepared him for the moments when he would need to be stronger than he ever imagined possible. His last words, spoken to a room full of students at his military academy, captured everything he believed. They called me slave. I called myself free. It's what you call yourself that matters. The world will try to define you, to limit you, to put you in a box. But you get to decide who you are. Never forget that. Never let anyone take that from you. This story reminds us that circumstances don't define us. Our choices do. Gabriel could have accepted his fate. He could have let the cruelty break him. Instead, he chose to learn, to grow, to fight not just with his hands, but with his mind. He transformed from a victim into a victor, from someone the world tried to erase into someone history could never forget. If this inspired you, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold stories of incredible people who changed the world. And tell me in the comments What would you have done in his position? What part of Gabriel's story resonated with you the most? See you in the next one.